to part 2 of the Galina sew along. We get started sewing in this video. Where I left off at the end of last video was cutting out all your pieces. So this is what you should have cut out for the bra. I will go into the panty once we get there. Let's tackle one thing at a time. So you should have your back band cut out, your frame, which is on the fold, boom, 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 there we go. Your side cup and your center cup, that's it. So the first step is we are going to sew the cups together along the vertical seam. We're going to use a straight stitch. Now you might be wondering, if you're new to bra making, you might be wondering, whoa, you use a straight stitch? I thought you had to use some sort of special stitch on sewing lingerie. So generally speaking, you can use a straight stitch on vertical seams and a zigzag stitch on horizontal seams. The reason being is that straight stitches don't have any stretch, but you don't stretch vertically, you stretch mostly widthwise. Also, adding a straight stitch on the cup seam, the vertical cup seam, adds a little bit of stability to the cups. And we will be using a zigzag stitch almost on all, let me think about this, yes, on all horizontal seams. There are a couple cases where you would use a straight stitch on horizontal seam, but let's not get into that. Let's keep things simple. So I definitely recommend for this step referring to your pattern pieces, because it is so easy to flip this upside down and then sew the vertical seam upside down. So use your pattern pieces. I'm not a big pinner or I mark notches. That is my weakness, but in this step I highly recommend marking your notches where your apex is. Which, fun fact, apex on a bra also means, it means where your nipple is, but it also means where the strap point meets the bra. I learned that recently. So you're going to use this, make sure that your cups are right side up, and then you will put right sides together, and you will sew it with a straight stitch, back stitch at the top and the bottom, 1/4 inch seam allowance. There are 1/4 inch seam allowance on all seam allowances for the Galina. Unless I say otherwise, 1/4 inch, which should be the width of your presser foot. Okay, let me get sewing that. Okay, so I have sewn the cups together along the vertical seam using a straight stitch. I serged my seam allowances. I do have a serger. If you do not have a serger, you can just press your seam allowances, and by press I mean folding your seam allowances to one side and then using a zigzag stitch or a straight stitch to top stitch the seam allowances down. Technically, you don't need to finish your seam allowances if you're using a fabric that doesn't fray, which 95% of the time lingerie fabrics don't fray. So if you don't have a serger, you don't want to use a straight stitch, you don't want a top stitch of any kind, you don't have to do it. Speaking of pressing, you can press lingerie fabrics. I get that question a lot. We definitely press our seam allowances to make them look nice and flat and professional. What you want to do is make sure that your iron is on a synthetic setting, and it's okay to use steam. We definitely use a lot of steam to press our seam allowances. So once the cups are together, the next step is to sew the fold over elastic along the top edge of the bra cups. What you do not want to do is you don't want to sew them on the underarm, on the wire seam line, or on the neckline edge. So we are sewing them here. We are not sewing them here. So with the Galina, if you purchase a kit from Madalynne, it comes with 2 options for fold over elastic. One is the standard width, which I have here, which is 3/8 of an inch when folded. The other one is 3/4 of an inch when folded. Now, when applying the fold over elastic to the Galina, you are gonna, if you're using the wider fold over elastic, you're gonna have to use your discretion and decide whether you want to overlap the fold over elastic with the bra 1/4 inch, or if you want to have the indentation that's down the center align with the edge of the fabric. Let me explain that a little bit more because it is a little bit confusing. So when you have a 3/8 inch fold over elastic, when I put it on the edge of any edge, that indentation is going to align with the edge of the fabric. Now, if you have 3/4 inch fold over elastic, if you overlap the fold over elastic and the bra, that indentation is going to sit a little bit higher than if you had 3/8 inch. So if you sew the 3/4 inch fold over elastic to the top edge of the bra and you overlap just 1/4 inch, your bra cups on body are going to sit a little bit higher. So I am a 26-28 AB cup, and when I first made the Galina, I thought that the 3/4 inch would be too much because I have a very small frame, but it's just kind of a look. So when you're sewing the fold over elastic, just keep that in mind, and that if you're sewing the 3/4 inch and you're overlapping only 1/4 inch, the edge of that pattern piece is going to sit a little bit higher. Okay, so I'm going to sew this. With fold over elastic, we are going to sew it in 2 passes. And by pass, I mean step. So fold over elastic is sewed in 2 steps. The first step is sewn with the bra cups wrong side face up, and then we're going to flip it to the right side and sew the second pass. We're going to be using a zigzag stitch on both passes. Now, the question that I get a lot is what width and length zigzag stitch should I use? It varies from machine to machine. So there is no standard. So what I would do is I would look at your ready to wear bras, kind of compare and contrast and make sure that it is similar. What you don't want is you don't want your zigzags to be more than half the width or going past that indentation on the fold over elastic. When I sew it, I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail at the beginning and the end. Whenever I'm sewing elastic, I usually do that, so I'm just going to call it out now. So let's start sewing. And once I start sewing, I will show you where my stitches are, and it might make a little bit more sense. Of course, I use probably the worst color for a tutorial, black on black, but I promise I will show you to the best that I can. Okay, so I have sewn the first pass of the fold over elastic. If you take a peek a little bit closer, let's see if the camera will focus, you can see that my zigzag stitches are right where my finger is. And if I look on the wrong side, so what you want to do is you want to get your zigzag stitches as close to the flat edge as possible. And then after you sew the first pass, you can use if you have these. If you don't, I highly recommend that you get them. They're called duck-billed scissors. They allow you to trim your seam allowances super close to this stitch line. Just makes it a lot easier since you're working with small seam allowances. Using your giant 8-inch Ginger scissors can be difficult. There's not much to trim back on this edge. There's a little bit. Okay, so once you sew in the first pass or the first step, we are going to fold that fold over elastic and sew the second pass. Again, you want to make sure that your zigzag stitches, when you're sewing, If your zigzag stitches go here, 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 you want to make sure that this side of the zigzag is lining up really close to that flat edge there. That will prevent you from having a lip on your fold over elastic. Okay, so I have sewn the first and the second pass of the fold over elastic along the top edge of the bra cups. Hopefully you did it on the right edge. Believe me, when I first started making the Galinas, I was like so confused by which edge is which. They definitely look similar. So the next step is that we are gonna sew the fold over elastic along this edge, along the neckline edge. And as it extends past the bra cups, it's gonna become the straps. So at this point, you can definitely trim those little tails of fold over elastic. And you're gonna do it the same way. So we're gonna sew it in 2 passes. We're gonna start with the fabric wrong side face up. But the difference between this step and the previous step is that so for my first pass, I'm gonna sew my zigzags from here to here. Then I'm gonna flip it, and then I'm gonna sew the second pass, but on the second pass, I'm gonna keep sewing that zigzag all the way up and to create those straps. And then once I pass this point, I'm going to put clear elastic or rubber elastic inside, and it's gonna help it give the fold over elastic a little bit more stability. If you don't have that clear elastic in there or that rubber elastic, what we found is that as the bra will wear out, especially for plus size and full bust, you'll see that the elastic will look very stretched out when it's being worn, and it will go, as you would say, more quicker as you wear it. So the clear elastic or the rubber elastic increases the longevity of. Okay, just kidding. Before you get started, I forgot to mention one very important thing. So as you're sewing, before you start sewing your fold over elastic to your bra cups, the fold over elastic should extend 14.5 inches past the edge of the cups. So you're gonna have to measure that out. This is not correct, but to fit everything on the frame of the camera so that it makes sense, let's just pretend that this is 14.5 inches. I'm gonna pin mark this here, and then I'm gonna pin it to the top edge of the cup so that I know how much I need to sew here before I flip it over and sew the long edge. Okay, now we're ready to sew this step. So with wrong sides together, you are going to start pinning from the center front outwards. Now, depending on which width fold over elastic that you used, your bra might extend more on this side where it meets the frame. Don't panic. Don't get your panties in a knot. Totally fine. It's okay. What you will do is priority is that it is symmetrical here, that you pin it all the way here. If it extends past the frame, that's okay. We will just trim it down later. It should be a 1-to-1 ratio, so don't try to squeeze it in to the frame. So just start pinning, and we will cut it down if needed. Okay, so I have my bra cups pinned to my frame, and I'm gonna sew it with a straight stitch. I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning and the end. After I finish sewing it, I'm going to chop off the little bit here that extends past the frame and then blend it to 0 right at the strap point.